When you want to get off the darkest ground, but gravity pulls you straight down. Earth from a bird's eye view. You should grow feathers and see this too. When you want to get off the darkest ground, but gravity pulls you straight down. When you want to get off the darkest ground, but gravity pulls you straight down. Clear sky. When you want to get off the darkest ground, but gravity pulls you straight down. Earth from a bird's eye view. You should grow feathers and see this too. When you want to get off the darkest ground, but gravity pulls you straight down. When you want to get off the darkest ground, but gravity pulls you straight down. Clear sky.
Oh, I could be all it is you need, 'cause we are trying to find a way to feel. If I could sleep, I'd dream of what we'd be, but I can feel you slip further from me. Oh, it makes it hard to be when you are all that I want but don't have. And I'll run into the sea, follow this heart that escapes me. It escapes me, and I'm forget me. All I want.
Hello everyone, just bear with me for a second. Okay, that's one bit. And there's another bit. Hello everyone. Well, it's good to see you all. Some technical issues, but I'm sure we will work them out in due course. It's good to see you all. So today, we're going to be reading a small book here. Atomic Habits, Tiny Challenges, and Remarkable Results. This is by James Clear, recommended me by a guest. Atomic Habits, an easy and proven way to build good habits and break bad ones. So I'm going to give this one a read. It's quite a long book. We get out of this somewhere around 200 pages, 280 pages. It's quite a very long book. But I hope you stay with me. We'll read through it. And we'll give it a go. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. Introduction. My story. On the final day of my sophomore year of high school, I was hit in the face with a baseball bat. As my classmate took a full swing, the bat slipped out of his hands and came flying towards me before striking me directly between the eyes. I have no memory of the moment of impact. The bat smashed into my face with such force that it crushed my nose into a distorted U shape. The collision sent the soft tissue of my brain slamming to the inside of my skull. Immediately a wave of swelling surged throughout my head, and in a fraction of a second, I had a broken nose, multiple skull fractures, and 2 shattered eye sockets. When I opened my eyes, I saw people staring at me and running over to help. I looked down, and I noticed spots of red on my clothes. One of my classmates took the shirt off his back and handed it to me. I used it to plug the stream of blood rushing from my broken nose. Shocked and confused, I was unaware of how seriously I had been injured. My teacher looped his arm around my shoulders and we began the long walk back to the nurse's office across the field, down the hill, and back into the school. Random hands touched my sides, holding me upright. We took our time and walked slowly. Nobody realized that every minute mattered. When we arrived at the nurse's office, she asked me a series of questions. What year is it? It's 1998, I answered. It was actually 2002. Who was the President of the United States? Bill Clinton, I said. The correct answer was George W. Bush. What is your mum's name? I stalled 10 seconds passed. Paddy, I said casually, ignoring the fact that it had taken me 10 seconds to remember my own mother's name. The last question, I remembered my body was unable to handle the rapid swelling in my brain, and I lost consciousness before an ambulance arrived. Minutes later, I was carried out of the stall and taken to the local hospital. Shortly after arriving, my body began shutting down. I struggled with basic functions like swallowing and breathing. I had my first seizures of the day. Then I stopped breathing entirely. As the doctors hurried me to supply me with oxygen, they decided the local hospital was unequipped to handle the situation and ordered a helicopter to fly me to a larger hospital in Cincinnati. I was run out of the emergency room doors and towards a helipad across the street. The stretcher rattled onto a bumpy sidewalk as one of the nurses pushed me along while another one pumped each breath into me by hand. My mother, who had arrived at the hospital a few minutes before, climbed into the helicopter beside me. I remained unconscious and unable to breathe on my own as she held my hand during the flight. While my mother rode with me, in the helicopter, my father went home to check on my brother and sister and break the news to them. He chopped back tears to explain to my sister that I would miss her 8th grade graduation ceremony that night. After passing my siblings off to friends and family, he drove to Cincinnati to meet my mother. When my mum and I landed on the roof of the hospital, a team of nearly 20 doctors and nurses sprinted up onto the helipad and wheeled me into the trauma unit. By this time, the swelling in my brain had become so severe that I was having repeated post-traumatic seizures. My broken bones needed to be fixed, but I was in no condition to undergo surgery. After yet another seizure of my third of the day, I was put into a medically induced coma and placed on a ventilator. My parents were no strangers to this hospital. 10 years earlier, they had entered the same building on the ground floor after my sister was diagnosed with leukemia at age 3. I was 5 at the time. That makes him 15 today. My brother was just 6 months old, and after 2.5 years of chemotherapy treatments, spinal taps, and bone marrow biopsies, my sister finally walked out of the hospital happy, healthy, and cancer-free. And now, after 10 years of normal life, my parents found themselves back in the same place with a different child. While I slipped into a coma, the hospital sent a priest and a social worker to comfort my parents. It was the same priest who had met them a decade earlier on the evening they found out my sister had cancer. As the day faded into night, a series of machines kept me alive. My parents slept restlessly on the hospital mattress. One moment they would collapse from fatigue, the next they would be wide awake with worry. My mother would tell me later, "It was one of the worst nights I've ever had." Mercifully, by the next morning my breathing had rebounded to the point where the doctors felt comfortable releasing me from the coma. When I finally regained consciousness, I discovered that I had lost my ability to smell. As a test, a nurse asked me to blow my nose and sniff an apple juice box. My sense of smell returned, but to everyone's surprise, the act of blowing my nose forced air through the fractures of my eye sockets and pushed my left eye outward. My eyeball bulged out of the socket, held precariously in place by my eyelid and the optic nerve attaching it to my brain. This is a difficult word. Let's try this one. The ophthalmologist said my eye would gradually slide back into place as the air seeped out, but it was hard to tell how long this would take. I was scheduled for surgery 1 week later, which would allow me some additional time to heal. I looked like I had been on the wrong end of a boxing match, but I was cleared to leave the hospital, and I returned home with a broken nose, 6 facial fractures, and a bulging left eye. The following months were hard. It felt like everything in my life was on pause. I had double vision for weeks. I literally couldn't see straight. It took more than a month, but my eyeball finally did eventually return to its normal location. Between the seizures and my vision problems, it was 8 months before I could drive again. At physical therapy, I practiced basic motor patterns like walking in a straight line. I was determined not to let my injury get me down, but there were more than a few moments where I felt depressed and overwhelmed. I became painfully aware of how far I had to go when I returned to the baseball field 1 year later. Baseball had always been a major part of my life. My dad had played minor league baseball for the St. Louis Cardinals, and I had a dream of playing professionally too. After months of rehabilitation, what I wanted to do more than anything was to get back on the field. But my return to baseball was not smooth. When the season rolled around, I was the only junior to be cut from the varsity baseball team. I was sent down to play with the sophomores on junior varsity. I had been playing since age 4. And for someone who had spent so much time and effort on the sport, getting cut was humiliating. I vividly remember the day it happened. I sat in my car and cried as I flipped through the radio, desperately searching for a song that would make me feel better. After a year of self-doubt, I managed to make a varsity team as a senior, but I rarely made it onto the field. In total, I played 11 innings of high school varsity baseball. Barely more than a single game. Despite my lackluster high school career, I still believe I could become a great player, and I knew that if things were going to improve, I was the one responsible for making it happen. The turning point came 2 years after my injury, where I began to college at Dempsey University. It was a new beginning, and it was the place where I would discover the surprising power of small habits for the first time. Let's just quickly get there. Second section of the introduction. How I learned about habits. Attending Denson was one of the best decisions in my life. I earned a spot on the baseball team, and although I was the bottom of the roster as a freshman, I was thrilled. Despite the chaos of my high school years, I had finally managed to become a college athlete. I wasn't going to be starting on the baseball team anytime soon, so I focused on getting my life in order. While my peers stayed up late and played video games, I built good sleep habits and went to bed early each night. In the messy world of a college dorm, I made it a point to keep my room neat and tidy. These improvements were minor, but they gave me a sense of control over my life. I started to feel confident again, and this growing belief in myself rippled into the classroom as I improved my studying habits and managed to earn straight A's during my first year. A habit is a routine or behavior that is performed regularly, and in many cases, automatically. As each semester I passed, I accumulated a small but consistent habits that ultimately led to results that were unimaginable to me when I started. For example, the first time in my life, I made it a habit to lift weights multiple times per week, and in the years that followed, my 6'4" frame bulked up from a featherweight 170 to a lean 200 pounds. When my sophomore season arrived, I earned a starting role on the pitching staff. By my junior year, I was voted team captain, and at the end of the season, I was selected for the all-conference team. It was not until my senior season that my sleep habits, study habits, and strength training habits really began to pay off. 6 years I had been hit in the face with a baseball bat, flown to the hospital, placed into a coma. I was selected as a top male athlete at Denson University and named to the ESPN Academic All-America team. An honor given to just 33 players across the country. By the time I graduated, I was listed in the school record books in 8 different categories. The same year, I was awarded the university's highest academic honor, the President's Medal. I hope you forgive me if this all sounds boastful. To be honest, there was nothing legendary or historic about my athlete career. I never ended up playing professionally. However, looking back on those years, I believed I accomplished something just as rare. I fulfilled my potential. And I believe the concept in this book can help you fulfill your potential as well. We all face challenges in life. This injury was one of mine. And the experience taught me a critical lesson. Changes that seem small and unimportant at first will compound into remarkable results if you're willing to stick with them for years. We all deal with setbacks in the long run. The quality of our lives often depends on the quality of our habits. With the same habits, you'll end up with the same results, but with better habits, anything is possible. Maybe there are people that can achieve incredible successes overnight. I don't know any of them, and I'm certainly not one of them. There wasn't one defining moment on my journey from medically induced coma to academic All-American. There were many. It was a gradual evolution of a long series of small wins and tiny breakthroughs. The only way I made progress, the only choice I had, was to start small. And I employed the same strategy a few years later when I started my own business and began working on this book. How and why I wrote this book. In November 2012, I began publishing articles at jamesclear.com. For the years, I had keeping notes about my personal experience with habits, and I was finally ready to share some of them publicly. I began by publishing a new article every Monday and Thursday. Within a few months, this simple writing habit led to 1 1,000 email subscribers, and by the end of 2013, the number had grown to more than 30,000 people. Excuse me. In 2014, my email expanded to over 100,000 subscribers, which made it one of the fast engrossing newsletters on the internet. I felt like an imposter when I began writing 2 years earlier, but now I felt I was becoming an expert on habits, a new label that excited me but also felt uncomfortable. I had never considered myself a master of the topic, but rather somebody who was experimenting alongside my readers. In 2015, I reached 200,000 email subscribers and a signed book deal with Penguin Random House to begin writing the book you are reading now. As my audience grew, so did my business opportunities, and I was increasingly asked to speak to top companies about the science of habit formation, behavior changes, and continuous improvements. I found myself delivering keynote speeches at conferences in the United States and Europe. In 2016, my articles finally began to appear regularly in major publications like Time, Entrepreneur, and Forbes. Incredibly, my writing was read over by 8 million people that year. Coaches in the NFL, NBA, and MLB began reading my work and sharing it with their teams. At the start of 2017, I launched the Habits Academy, which became my premier training platform for organizations and individuals interested in building better habits for life and work. Fortune 500 companies and growing startups began to enroll their leaders and train their staff. In total, over 10,000 leaders and managers and coaches and teachers have graduated from the Habits Academy, and my work with them has taught me an incredible amount of what it takes to make habits work in the real world. As I put the finishing touches on this book in 2018, JamesClear.com is receiving millions of visitors per month, and nearly 500,000 people subscribe to my weekly email newsletters. A number that is so far beyond my expectations when I began. I'm not sure what to think of it. How this podcast, I guess, will benefit you. The entrepreneur and investor Naval Ravikant has said, to write a great book, you must first become the book. I originally learned about the ideas mentioned here, and I had to live them. I had to rely on small habits, rebounds from my injuries to get stronger in the gym, to perform at a high level on the field, to become a writer, to build a successful business, and to simply develop into a responsible adult. Small habits helped me to fill my potential, and since you started listening here, I'm guessing you'd like to fulfill yours as well. In the videos that follow, I will share a step-by-step plan for building better habits, not for days or weeks, but for a lifetime. While science supports everything I've written, this story is not an academic research paper, it's an operating manual. You'll find wisdom and practical advice front and center as I explain the science of how to create and change your habits in the way that is easy to understand and apply. The fields I drag on, biology, neuroscience, philosophy, psychology, and more, have been around for many years. What I offer you is a synthesis of the best ideas smart people figure out a long time ago, as well as the most compelling discoveries scientists have made recently. My contribution, I hope, is to find the ideas that matter most and connect them in a way that is highly actionable. Anything wise in these pages you should credit to the many experts who preceded me. Anything foolish, assume it's my error. The backbone of this book is my 4-step module of habits: cue, cravings, response, and rewards. Let's pull that down a bit. You can see the book. I've lost my place. There we go. And the 4 laws of the behavior change that evolve out of these steps. Readers with a psychology background may recognize some of these terms from the operant conditioning, which was first proposed as a stimulus response reward by B.F. Skinner in the 1930s, and has been popularized more recently as a cue routine reward in The Power of Habits by Charles Duhigg. Behavioral scientists like Skinner realized that if you offer the right reward or punishment, you could get people to act in a certain way. But Skinner's model did an excellent job of explaining how external stimulus influence our habits It lacked a good explanation. Oops. For how our thoughts and feelings impact our behavior, internal states and our mood and emotions matter. Our behavior. Internal states, our moods and emotions matter too. In recent decades, scientists have begun to determine the connection between our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. This research will also be covered in these pages. In total, the framework which I offer is an integral model of cognitive and behavioral sciences. I believe it is one of the first models of the human behavior to accurately account for both influences of the external stimuli and internal emotions on our habits. While some of the languages may be familiar, I am confident that the details and the applications of the 4 laws of behavioral change will offer a new way to think about your habits. Human behavior is always changing, situation to situation, moment to moment, second to second. But this book is about what doesn't change. It's about the fundamentals of human behavior, the lasting principles you can rely on year after year, the ideas you can build a business around, build a family around, and build a life around. There is no one way to create better habits, but this book describes the best way I know, an approach that will be effective regardless of where you start or what you're trying to change. The strategies I cover will be relevant to anyone who is looking for a step-by-step system for improvement, whether your goals center on health, money, or productivity, relationships, or all of the above. As long as human behavior is involved, this book will be your guide. The fundamentals. Why tiny changes make a big difference. Let's see how long this chapter is. And we'll make sure we get through it. I like to look ahead just to see how far we have to go. Okay, so we're on page 14, and we're going to go to page 28 for chapter 1, or 13. There we go. The fate of the British cycling has changed. The fate of British cycling changed one day. Oh, let me start again. The surprising power of atomic habits, chapter 1. The fate of British cycling changed one day in 2003. The organisation was the governing body for professional cycling in Great Britain, had recently hired Dave Brailsford as its new performance director. At the time, professional cyclists in Great Britain had endured nearly 100 years of mediocrity. Since 1908, British riders had won just a single gold medal at the Olympic Games, and they had fared even worse in cycling's best race, the Tour de France. In 110 years, no British cyclist has ever won that event. In fact, the performance of the British riders had been so underwhelming that one of the top bike manufacturers in Europe refused to sell bikes to the team because they were afraid it would hurt sales if other professionals saw the British using their gear. Brailsford had been hired to put the British cycling on a new trajectory. What made him different from previous coaches was his relentless commitment to a strategy that he referred to as the aggregation of marginal gains, which was the philosophy searching for a tiny margin of improvement in everything you do. Brailsford said, the whole principle came from the idea that if you broke down everything you could think that goes into riding a bike, then improve by 1%, you'll get significant increase when you put them all together. Brailsford and his coaches began making small adjustments you might expect from a professional cycling team. They redesigned the bike seats to make them more comfortable and rubbed alcohol in the tyres for better grip. They asked riders to wear electrically heated overshorts and maintain ideal muscle temperature while riding around. Used the biofeedback sensors to monitor how each athlete responded to a particular workout. The team tested various fabrics in a wind tunnel and had their outdoor riders switch to an indoor racing suits, which proved to be lighter and more aerodynamic. But they didn't stop there. Brailsford and his team continued to find 1% improvements in overlooked and unexpected areas. They tested different types of massage gels to see which one would lead to the fastest muscle recovery. They hired a surgeon to test each of the riders' best way to wash their hands to reduce the chances of catching a cold. They determined the type of pillow and mattress that led to the best night's sleep for each rider. They even painted in the inside of the team truck white, which helped them spot the little bits of dust that would normally slip unnoticed, but could degrade the performance of a finely tuned bike. These and hundreds of other small improvements accumulated. The results came faster than anyone could have imagined. Just 5 years after Brailsford took over, the British cycling team dominated the road and track and cycling events of the 2008 Olympic Games in Beijing, where they won an astounding 60% of gold medals available. 4 years later, when the Olympic Games came to London, the Brits raised the bar as they set 9 Olympic records and 7 world records. The same year, Bradley Wiggins became the first British cyclist to win the Tour de France. The next year, his teammate Chris Froome won the race, and he would go on to win again in 2015, 16 and 17, giving the British team 5 Tour de France victories in 6 years. During the 10-year span from 2007 to 2017, British cyclists won 178 world championships and 66 Olympic or Paralympic gold medals and captured 5 Tour de France victories in what is widely regarded as the most successful run in cycling history. How did this happen? How did a team of previously ordinary athletes transform a world into a world champions with a tiny bit of change? At that. At the first glance, it would seem that a modest difference at best. Why do small improvements accumulate into such remarkable results? And how can you replicate this approach in your own life? Why small habits make a big difference. It's so easy to overestimate the importance of the defining moment and underestimate the value of making small improvements on a daily basis. Too often we convince ourselves that massive success requires massive action. Whether it is losing weight, building a business, writing a book, winning a championship, or achieving any other goal, we put pressure on ourselves to make some earth-shattering improvement that everyone will talk about. Meanwhile, improving by 1% isn't particularly notable. Sometimes it isn't even noticeable. But it can be far more meaningful, especially in the long run. The difference is a tiny improvement can make over time astounding. Here's how the maths works out. If you can get 1% better each day for a year, you'll end up 37% better by the time you're done. Conversely, if you get 1% worse each day, you'll decline nearly down to 0. What starts as a small win or a minor setback accumulates into something much, much more. So, note at the bottom here. It says, as this book was going to print, new information about the British cycling team has come out. You can see my thoughts at atomichabits.com/cycling. On this page is a graph, which is titled 1% better every day. I think this is basically the information that he's talking about. So there you go. At the bottom, it says, Figure 1. The effects of small habits compound over time. For example, if you can get 1% better each day, you'll end up with results that are nearly 37 times better after 1 year. Habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. The same way that money multiplies through compound interest, the effects of your habits multiply as you repeat them. They seem to make little difference on any given day, and yet the impact that they deliver is over months and years can be enormous. It is only when looking back 2 or 5 or perhaps 10 years later that the value of good habits and the cost of bad ones becomes strikingly apparent. This can be a difficult concept to appreciate in daily life. We often dismiss small changes because they don't seem to matter very much in the moment. If you save little money now and you're still not a millionaire, if you go to the gym 3 days in a row you're still out of shape, if you study Mandarin for an hour tonight, you still haven't learned the language. We make a few changes, but the results never seem to come quickly, and so we slide back to our previous routines. Unfortunately, the slow pace of transformation also makes it easy to let a bad habit slide. If you eat an unhealthy meal today, the scale doesn't move much. If you work late tonight and ignore your family, they'll forgive you. If you procrastinate and you put your project off until tomorrow, there will usually be time to finish it later. A single decision is easy to dismiss, but when we repeat 1% errors day after day after day by replicating poor decisions, duplicating tiny mistakes, and rationalizing little excuses, our small choices compound into a toxic result. It is the accumulation of many missteps, a 1% decline here and there, that eventually leads to a problem. The impact created by a change in your habits is similar to the effect of a shifting route of an airplane by just a few degrees. Imagine you are flying from Los Angeles to New York City. If a pilot is leaving from Los Angeles X, or just is heading by 3.5 degrees north, you will land in Washington DC instead of New York. Such a small change is barely noticeable at takeoff. The nose of the airplane moves just a few feet, but when margin magnified across the entire United States, you end up hundreds of miles apart. He actually calculated this, apparently. Similar slight change in your daily habits can guide your life to a very different decision. Making a choice that is 1% better or 1% worse seems insignificant at the moment. But over the span of moments that will make up a lifetime, these choices determine the difference between who you are and who you could be. Success is the product of daily habits, not once-in-a-lifetime transformations. That said, it doesn't matter how successful or unsuccessful you are. Right now, what matters, whether your habits that you are putting on the path towards success. You should be far more concerned with your current trajectory than with your results. If you're a millionaire but you spend more than you earn each month, you're on a bad trajectory. If your spending habits don't change, it's not going to end well. Conversely, if you're broke, but you save a little bit each month, then you're on a path towards financial freedom, even if you're moving slower than you'd like. Your outcomes are a lagging measure of your habits. Your net worth is a lagging measure of your financial habits. Your weight is a lagging measure of your eating habits, and your knowledge is a lagging measure of your learning habits. Your clutter is a lagging measure of your cleaning habits, and you get what you repeat. If you want to predict where you'll end up in life, all you have to do is follow the curve of tiny gains or tiny losses and see how your daily choices will compound into 10 or 20 years down the line. Are you spending less than you earn each month? Are you making it to the gym each week? Are you reading books and learning something new each day? Tiny battles like this are the ones that will define your future self. Time magnifies the margin between success and failure. It will multiply whatever you feed it. Good habits make time your ally. Bad habits make time your enemy. Habits are a double-edged sword. Bad habits can cut you down just as easily as good habits can build you up. Which is why understanding the details is crucial. You need to know how habits work and how to design them to your liking, so you can avoid the dangerous half of the blade. Your habits can compound for you or against you. We will need to fix this lighting at some point. So there's a complicated table in this one. It says your habits can compound for you or against you. Positive compounding at the top and negative compounding on the right column. Productivity compounds. Accomplishing one extra task is a small feat on any given day, but it counts a lot more over an entire career. It counts for a lot more over an entire career. The effect of automating an old task or mastering a new skill can be even greater. The more tasks you handle without thinking, the more your brain is free to focus on other areas. Stress compounds. The frustration of a traffic jam, the weight of a parenting response, the worry of making ends meet, the strain of slightly high blood pressure. By themselves, these common causes of stress are manageable, but when they persist for years, the little stress compounds into serious health issues. Knowledge compounds. Learning one new idea will not make you a genius, but commitment to a lifelong learning can be transformative. Furthermore, each book you read not only teaches you something new, but opens up a different way of thinking about old ideas. Warren Buffett says, it's like how knowledge works. It builds up like compound interest. Negative thought compounds. The more you think of yourself as worthless, stupid, or ugly, the more you'll condition yourself to interpret life that way. You'll get trapped in the thought loop. The same is true for how you think about others. Once you fall into the habit of seeing people as angry, unjust, or selfish, you see those kind of people everywhere. Relationship compound. People reflect on your behavior back to you. The more you help others, the more they want to help you. Being a bit nicer in each interaction can result in a network of broad and strong connections over time. Outrage compound. Riots, protests, and mass movements are rarely the result of a single event. Instead, they are a series of microaggressions and daily aggravations that slowly multiply until one event tips the scale and the outrage spreads like wildfire. What progress is really like. Imagine that you have an ice cube sitting on the table in front of you. The room is cold and you can see your breath. It is currently 25 degrees. Ever so slowly, the room begins to heat up. 26 degrees, 27, 28. The ice cube is still sitting on the table in front of you. 29 degrees, 30, 31. Still, nothing happened. Then 32 degrees and the ice begins to melt. At 1 degree shift, seemingly no different from the temperature increase like before, it unlocks a huge change. Breakthrough in moments are often the results of many previous actions, which build up the potential required to unleash a major change. This pattern shows up everywhere. Cancer spends 80% of its life in undetectable, and then takes over the body in months. Bamboo can barely be seen for the first 5 years as it builds extensive root systems under the ground before exploding 90 feet into the air within 6 weeks. Similarly, habits often appear to make no difference until you cross a critical threshold and unlock a new performance. In early and middle stages of any quest, there's often a valley of disappointment. You expect to make progress in a linear fashion, and it's frustrating how ineffective change can seem during the first days, weeks, and even months. It doesn't feel you're going anywhere, but it's a hallmark of any compounding process. The most powerful outcomes are delayed. This is one of the core reasons it's so hard to build habits that last. People make small changes, fail to see the tangible results, and decide to stop. You think, I've been running every day for a month, so why can't I see any change in my body? One of this kind of thinking takes over. It's easy to let good habits fall by the wayside. But in order to make meaningful difference, habits need to persist long enough to break through this plateau. This is what we call the plateau of latent potential. If you find yourself struggling to build a good habit or break a bad one, it is not because of your ability you've lost your ability to improve. It's often because you have not yet crossed the plateau of latent potential. Complaining about how not achieving success despite working hard is like complaining about an ice cube not melting when you've heated it from just 25 to 31 degrees. Your work was not wasted, it's just being stored. All the action happens at the 32 degrees. When you finally break through the plateau of latent potential, people will call it an overnight success. The outside world only sees the most dramatic events rather than all that predates it. But it's the work that you did so long ago, when it seems impossible you weren't making any progress, that what makes the jumps today possible. It is the way the human equivalent of a genealogical pressure. 2 tectonic plates can grind against one another for millions of years, the tension slowly building all the while. Then one day, they rub each other once again in the same fashion they have for ages. But this time the tension is too great. An earthquake erupts. Change can take years before it happens all at once. Mastery requires patience. The San Antonio Spurs, one of the most successful teams in the NBA, have a quote from the social reformer Jacob Riis hanging in their locker room. When nothing seems to help, I go and look at a stone cutter hammering away at his rock. Perhaps 100 times without making so much of a crack in showing in it. At 101st blow, it was split in 2, and I know that it was not that last blow that did it, but all that had gone before. Diagram of the plateau of latent potential here. Figure 2. We often expect the process to be linear. At the very least, we hope it will come quickly. In the reality, our results is that our efforts are often delayed. It is not until months or years later that we realize the true value of the previous work we had done. This can result in a valley of disappointment. where people feel discouraged after putting in weeks or months of work without experiencing any result. However, this work was not wasted. It was simply being stored until it is not until much later that the full value of previous effort is revealed. All big things come from small beginnings. The seed of every habit is a single tiny decision. But that decision is repeated. A habit sprouts and grows stronger. Roots entrench themselves and branch grow. The task of breaking a bad habit is uprooting a powerful oak within us. The task of building good habits is like cultivating a delicate flower one at a time. But what determines whether we stick with a habit long enough to survive the plateau of latent potential and break through the other side? What is it that causes some people to slide into unwanted habits and enables others to enjoy the compounding effects of good ones? Forget about goals. Focus on systems instead. Prevailing wisdom claims that the very best way to achieve what we want in life, getting into better shape, building a successful business, relaxing more and worrying less, spending more time with friends and family, is to set specific, actionable goals. For many years, this is how I approached my habits. For each one, a goal was to be reached. I set goals for the grades I wanted to get in school, for the weights I wanted to lift in the gym, for the profits I wanted to earn in business. I succeeded in a few, but I failed a lot of them. Eventually, I began to realize that my results had very little to do with the goals that I set, and nearly everything I had to do with the systems I followed. What is the difference between system and a goal? It's distinction. It's a distinction I first learned from Scott Adams, the cartoon artist behind the Dilbert comic. Goals are about the results you want to achieve. Systems are about the processes that lead to those results. If you're a coach, your goal might be to win a championship. Your system is a way to recruit players, manage your assistant, coaches, and conduct practice. If you're an entrepreneur, your goal might be to build $1 million business. Your system is how you test product ideas, hire employees, and run marketing campaigns. If you're a musician, your goal might be to play a new piece. Your system is how often you practice, how you break down and tackle different measures, and how your method is for receiving feedback from your instructor. Now for the interesting question. If you completely ignore your goal and only focus on your systems, would you still succeed? For example, if you're a basketball coach and you ignored your goal to win a championship and focused only on getting on what your team does as practice each day, would you still get the results? I think you would. The goal in any sport is to finish with the best score, but it would be ridiculous to spend the whole game staring at the scoreboard. The only way to actually win is to get better each day. And in the words of the 3-time Super Bowl winner, Bill Walsh, the score could take care of itself. The same is true for other areas in life. If you want to win better results, then forget about setting goals. Focus on your systems instead. What do I mean by this? Are goals completely useless? Of course not. Goals are good for setting a direction, but systems are best for making progress. A handful of problems arise when you spend too much time thinking about your goals and not enough time designing your system. Problem 1. Winners and losers have the same goals. Goal setting suffers from a serious case of survivorship bias. We concentrate on people who end up winning, the survivors, mistakenly assume that all the ambitious goals led to their success, while overlooking all the people who had the same type of objective but didn't succeed. Every Olympian wants to win a gold medal. Every candidate wants to get the job. And if successful and unsuccessful people share the same goals, then the goal itself cannot be what differentiates the winners from the losers. It wasn't the goal of winning the Tour de France that propelled British cyclists to the top of the sport. Presumably they had wanted to win every race the year before, just like every other professional team. The goal had always been there, but it was only when they implemented a system of continuous small improvements that they achieved a different outcome. Problem 2. Achieving a goal is only a momentary change. Imagine you have a messy room and you set a goal to clean it. If you summon the energy to tidy up, then you will have a clean room for now. But if you maintain the same sloppy, pack-rat habits that led to a messy room in the first place, you'll soon be looking at a new pile of clutter and hoping for another burst of motivation. You're left chasing the same outcome because you never changed the system before it. You treated a symptom without addressing the cause. Achieving a goal only changes life for the moment. That is counterintuitive thing about improvement. We think we need it to change the results, but the results are not the problem. What we really need to change are the systems that cause those results. When you solve problems at the results level, you only solve them temporarily. In order to fix them, improve them for good, you need to solve problems in the system level. Fix the inputs and the outputs will fix themselves. Problem 3. Goals restrict your happiness. The implicit assumption behind any goal is this: once I reach my goal, then I'll be happy. The problem with the goal first mentality is that you're continually putting happiness up until the next milestone. I've slipped into this trap so many times I've lost count. For years, happiness was something for my future self to enjoy. I promised myself that I would gain 20 pounds of muscle after my business features in the New York Times. Then I could finally relax. Furthermore, goals create an either-or conflict. Either you achieve your goals and are successful, or you fail and you are a disappointment. Your mentality is boxed into a narrow version of happiness. This is misguided. It is unlikely that your path through life will actually match the exact journey that you had in mind when you set out. It makes no sense to restrict your satisfaction to one scenario where there are many paths to success. A systems first mentality provides the antidote. When you fall in love with the process rather than the product, you don't have to wait to give yourself permission to be happy. You can be satisfied anytime your system is running. And a system can be successful in many different forms, not just the one you first envision. Problem 4. Goals are at odds with the long-term progress. Finally, a goal-oriented mind can create a yo-yo effect. Many runners work hard for months, but soon they cross the finish line. They stop training, the race is no longer there to motivate them. When all of your hard work is focused on one particular goal, what is left to push you forward after you achieve it? This is why many people find themselves reverting back to their old habits after accomplishing a goal. The purpose of setting goals is to win the game. The purpose of building systems is to continue playing the game. True long-term thinking is goal-less thinking. It's not about singular accomplishments. It's about the cycle of endless refinement and continuous improvement. Ultimately, it is your commitment to the process that will determine your progress. A system of atomic habits. If you're having troubles changing your habits, the problem isn't you. The problem is your system. Bad habits repeat themselves again and again, not because you don't want to change, because you have the wrong system for change. Do not rise to the level of your goals. You will fail. You fall to the level of your systems. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Focusing on the overall systems rather than a single goal is one of the core themes of this book. It is one of the deeper meanings behind the word atomic. And we define atomic in the first part of the book as an extremely small amount of thing, the single irrevocable unit of a larger system, and 2, the sources of immense energy or power. By now, you've probably realized that an atomic habit refers to a tiny change, a marginal gain, a 1% improvement. But atomic habits are not just old habits, however small. They are little habits that are part of a larger system. Just as atoms are building blocks of molecules, atomic habits are the building blocks of remarkable results. Maybe somebody should think about microservices here. Habits are like the atoms of our lives. Each one is a fundamental unit that contributes to your overall improvement. At first, these tiny routines seem insignificant, but soon they build on each other and fuel bigger wins that multiply degrees that far outweighs the cost of their initial investment. They are both small and mighty. This is the meaning of the phrase atomic habits. A regular practice or routine is not that they are small or easy to do, but they are a source of incredible power, a component of the system of compound growth. Chapter summary. Habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. Getting 1% better every day counts for a lot in the long run. Habits are a double-edged sword. It can work for you or against you, which is why understanding the details is essential. Small changes often appear to make no difference until you cross a critical threshold. The most powerful outcomes of any compounding processes are delayed. You need to be patient. An atomic habit is a little habit that is part of a larger system. Just as atoms are building blocks of molecules, atomic habits are building blocks of remarkable results. If you want better results, then forget about setting goals, focus on your systems instead. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the levels of your system. And that was the introduction in chapter 1 of Atomic Habits. I'll see you all soon. It was great seeing you all. And we'll be back again to read more of this story. See you all soon.